So for folks who are just joining us, my name is Cynthia Edwards with the Gulf Coast Prairie LCC, and this is our regular monthly webinar, first Wednesday of the month at noon. And today we've got Dave Diamond and Lee Elliott from MORAP, the Missouri Resource Assessment Partnership at the University of Missouri. They're going to be talking to us about the work that was done on the Oklahoma Ecological Systems Mapping project. So with that, Dave and Lee, I think I'm just going to turn it over to you. Most of the folks who are engaged in the LCC have heard your names multiple times, given the projects you've done with us. So no lengthy introduction required, I don't think. So I will turn it over to you, Dave. Thank you.
Okay. Please let me know if I start fading out, and I'll try to speak louder. We've been working on ecological systems classification and mapping for Oklahoma for about, I think this is the 4th year, and it's now done. And this data set is compatible, similar to the data set that we created for Texas. So now these two data sets together cover almost 11% of the contiguous USA. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the methods and outcomes and potential uses, and then extension of the data. So these are the game types of Oklahoma. These were done in 1943 by Lester Duck and Jack Fletcher. Everybody in Oklahoma knows this map. And Bruce Hoagland took the map in 2008 and attached more modern ecological descriptions, vegetation descriptions to the map. And Bruce also did an ecological systems classification for Oklahoma in 2000. And that became the basis for Oklahoma's part of the ecological systems that NatureServe later used, and that was the basis for our mapping, the mapping targets. So here's Bruce on the left. That's Katie Ewing in the middle, and she collected most of the systematically collected ground data, I think all of it. And that's Lee Elliott on the right, and these guys helped a lot on this. Lee did most of the work, more work than anyone else anyway. Katie did the second, probably most work on the project. She worked for 2 summers collecting field data. Bruce didn't do anything, so no, actually he helped a lot in the mapping targets. This is Lee with Mark Howry, who is with ODWC, who also helped a lot in identifying mapping targets and in the mapping, and came to the field with us, spent long days and nights into the field. And there I am with a stump. So methods. I just got 4 slides on methods. Basically, what we did is we mapped the land cover type and overlaid abiotic site types or abiotic variables to define the mapped type. So here's an example of a cross timbers region area. We have a deciduous forest land cover. We may have sort of typical woodland soils. We have sandy soils and prairie soils in that cross timbers region, and so we called deciduous forest on those 3 different site types 3 different things, for example, in one county. And then slopes were mapped different, so deciduous forest on slopes, and then deciduous forests on riparian and bottomland soils. So that's the basic idea, is map the land cover and overlay the abiotic attributes to get the map type. So I want to emphasize that the land cover and the modeling and the description of types relied quite heavily on the field collected data. So there were 3,700 and some points collected by systematically by Katie. And that they served as the training data for the land cover and for other uses. And this is a very, very powerful data set. So there are a stack of explanatory variables associated with pixels, and those are used to map the land cover types. And there are 14 land cover types that we mapped for Oklahoma. So we improved the spatial resolution of those 30-meter resolution land cover types and the final product by generating image objects using sort of a fuzzed-up NAIP image. So image objects generated at 10-meter resolution circumscribe visually homogeneous areas. They're fairly small, these little polygons, these little objects, so that a given patch will contain more than one object. So now we have the land cover and we have the image objects, and we have the abiotic variables. And the abiotic variables, these little red lines here represent image objects, and the abiotic variables included soil groups, which from the county soil surveys, percent slope, information from hydrography, and land cover. So, and each image object has a given soil group, a given slope, a given relationship to hydrography, and a given land cover within a given region, and based on that, we give it a mapped type name. So that's the end of the methodology section. Okay, field data. Again, Katie, during the course of 2 field seasons, collected 3,714 georeference sample points, the blue and the brown here. We came in behind her and collected 1,114 additional georeferenced points. We collected points in areas that were problematic based on the initial classification. The blue points are in phase 1 and the brown points are in phase 2 of this project. And the land cover accuracy using these points was 85% for 14 classes. You could generate information from these georeference plots. Here's some statewide information. The most common herbaceous plant was Bermuda grass, followed by greenbrier, which is in the herbaceous layer. Most common trees are post oak and blackjack oak, and the shrubs are winged elm and cedar elm. The point is you can generate data like this for any given county or ecoregion or watershed, and you also can refer to these data and add to these data to answer other questions. There's also a photograph associated with almost all of these georeference plots. So this is a really nice historical quantitative data set that can be used and added to. We ended up mapping 166 types for Oklahoma. The pink there are urban areas. You can see in the central part of the state, Oklahoma City and Norman here, and suburbs, and this is the Tulsa region here. So you can generate statistics from these map types. These are some statewide statistics. Row crops are the biggest single class. There are cross timbers and prairie and mixed grass prairie pasture. Each make up 10% of the area and so on. One of the things to note here is that there are 87 types that make up fewer than 10,000 hectares each, so they're not very common, but they could be important to individual species or in and of themselves for conservation. They add local variation. A really large grassland patch with nothing else in it is very different than a really large grassland patch that has 5 other small type inclusions. So it really is good that we map these small types, relatively small types, I think. Just some statewide looks at the results. These are the major deciduous forests in Oklahoma, and the central green one, light green one here is a oak hickory, post oak, blackjack oak, black hickory type in the post oak savanna. There are two related oak hickory types, a drier and a wetter, over in the Ozarks and Ouachitas. The purple is the wetter type and the brown is the drier type. We mapped some sort of northern outliers of more southern types in southeast Oklahoma. This orange stuff here are woodlands that are fairly unique in the Arbuckle Mountains. Those over limestone look a lot like Edwards Plateau types. And then we also mapped a unique shrubland, low woodland and shrubland types in the Wichita Mountains, which are pink and purple here. And there's a unique blackjack oak type over Pleistocene sands as you move out west in Oklahoma. This is the Cimarron River here in the north, and this is the North Canadian River, and there are large areas of Pleistocene sands on the north sides of the northeast banks of those rivers. This is a zoom in of the Ouachita Mountains. The pink and red are pine plantations, which are pretty extensive. Purple is sort of a mesic deciduous oak hickory type. The light green is a drier oak hickory type. The dark green are shortleaf pine and shortleaf pine oak types. The yellow is a grassland. This is Broken Bow Lake, and you can see the green and purple area here are public lands around Broken Bow Lake, and they occur in sort of a sea of pine plantations. So there's kind of interesting patterns there in the Ouachita Mountains and the adjacent Arkansas Valley, which is right up here to the north. Okay, another zoom in, some types out in western Oklahoma. The purple and pink are canyon and gyp types, and the green and olive are types over Pleistocene sands on the north side of the Cimarron and the North Canadian River here. The orange type here is a famous Havard shin oak type, which has most of the prairie chickens in the state, lesser prairie chickens. So you can see the greens here are oak forests and woodlands that go a certain distance out toward the west, and then they become this olive color, which are shrublands on the sands, which is sand sage shrublands. And you can see in the river divide here, there's gypsum and sort of canyon types between the Cimarron and North Canadian River. So just interesting patterns there. I'd also like to point out that we did map riparian and bottomland types. So you can see how they pattern out on the landscape there. You can see the large area where there's no streams here. That's Pleistocene sands. Deep sands here and over here, north of the river. Okay, so that's sort of a look at the methods and a few of the results. And here's I just want to go into how these data can be used a little bit. This is for ODWC. They were doing a comprehensive wildlife strategy, and they had 6 regions that they were doing, and they had habitats within those regions that were of concern to them. So what we did is we took the 166 types and collapsed those down into fewer types that were habitats of concern for the ODWC. So if you start out with a fine resolution, fine thematic resolution, a lot of classes, you can collapse those classes down to fewer types that are of interest to different groups in different ways. So we did that for each region in Oklahoma. And I just also want to point out that then you can calculate the area and percent within those regions. So you can do this within ecoregions or watersheds or counties or whatever. So this is a very powerful data set. Once you have it, you can do a lot of things with it, including tallying area, collapsing down to fewer types, and so on. We did map disturbance types, and we called them ruderal types. These are basically invasive woodlands and shrublands on prairie soils. So you can look at those. The green here is ruderal or invasive deciduous shrubland and woodland in the area of a couple of wildlife management areas in Oklahoma. You can tally these things by county, for example. Juniper clearing is important in Oklahoma, so this is eastern Oklahoma. So those counties that are darker blue have more juniper, and maybe NRCS, for example, might want to direct more funds to those counties with more junipers for clearing. This is just an example of how you can summarize the data for use. We also did a project with the LCC related to prairies, and this is just showing how that Oklahoma and Texas data are compatible with each other, and you can do regional assessments across the state lines with the data set. As I said, almost 11% of the contiguous USA is done in this data set, unified data set for Oklahoma and Texas. You can do species modeling. This is a species habitat modeling for the Trans-Pecos, Texas. This isn't Oklahoma, but it's the idea applies. So they had target species, and they modeled the target species using our ecological systems classification and map, and then they overlaid all of those models, and the green areas have more of the target species predicted to be there than the orange areas. So this is just a way to use the classification to do species modeling, and then to identify conservation opportunity areas based on not only the actual vegetation, but the habitat modeled for target species. This is a couple of areas with duck and fletcher in southern Oklahoma. Our classification is finer resolution, but I wanted to, and this is useful. This obviously is more useful than that. But I also wanted to point out the further you zoom in, the more that mistakes, spatial and conceptual mistakes may show up. So it's really important to do conservation opportunity areas and public lands at a finer resolution using LIDAR and NAPE imagery. This is an image of LIDAR with the reds being higher and the blues being lower. And you can see the bridge across the Missouri River, the arches on that bridge, so you can see the data are very fine resolution, a fine spatial resolution, and you can get vegetation height or structure height from this. And that'll help you really reliably separate shrubs from trees from grass in a landscape. And this is what we did in a couple of two-county areas on the Texas coast. You can see the red is areas of shrub, and the greens are areas of woodland and forest. And it's so fine resolution that you can actually see sort of individual trees in a grassland here. And the distribution of shrubs and trees can be important for individual species of concern. For example, the northern bobwhite needs a mix of shrubs and trees. It's important to know where they are. You can't tell that based on the data we did, the ecological systems mapping. You need finer resolution, such as this. And you can't do it using a NAPE photo either. You can't quantify it. You can look at it, you can see it, but here you can actually quantify the area. I mean, how much area within this polygon is shrubby versus grass versus woody. And within this polygon, you can do those tallies easily. So it's not just a picture, it's a classification, and you can get numbers out of it, and that's important. So here is the product list, and you might, if you're interested, I can come back to this, but ODWC, the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation, has the raster data set for Oklahoma and the interpretive booklets, which has methods and short descriptions of all the map types and the range maps of all the map types, sort of a heat map of the ranges of all the map types, short descriptions, and long descriptions. Lee did long descriptions, ecological. He revised the ecological systems classification descriptions for all of the map types, both in Oklahoma and Texas. So those data are all available. The field data are very important, and there are photos with those field data. The vector data, I think, would be cumbersome to use. I think most users will want to use the raster data. And again, it's posted here at the ODWC. And the way I got this is I just went to Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Plant Conservation and looked for map products, and I clicked on that. I think it's just maybe 2 clicks away from their main web page you can get these data. Here's some noteworthy improvements. Eastern Oklahoma, we did map bottomland and riparian types throughout the states and ruderal, or we call those disturbance, ruderal, invasive shrublands and woodlands throughout the state. We got pine plantations pretty reasonably mapped. Arbuckle mountain types, drier versus wetter oak hickory types, slope types, northern outliers, sandy land types, which are of conservation concern. And then in western Oklahoma, we mapped the types on those Pleistocene sands on the north banks of the rivers that run through the state. We mapped gyp and canyon types, recently retired grasslands, that's sort of new CRP, mesquite type, black mesa types, Wichita Mountains types, and these are all pretty significant types that have not been mapped before. So it's a very powerful data set. Hopefully people will find it useful. I gave a presentation in Oklahoma to the GIS Council on Friday, a week ago, last Friday. We concluded that meeting at noon, and Alan Janetz told me there had been 105 downloads of that data by the end of the day on Friday. So people are getting the data. It's pretty gratifying. So that's it. That's all I have. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Dave. Do we have any questions from anyone on the phone? You can, Blair, can we unmute everyone?
We're unmuted.
Okay. So if anyone has any questions for Dave or Lee, now's the time to ask them, or you can follow up later.
This is Todd. I'll ask a question.
Sure,
David,
Todd, go ahead.
I thought I saw somewhere that the work you were doing was also going to produce potential vegetation for the polygons as well as existing. Is that true, or is that possible?
Yeah, for Texas, we have 97 enduring features or geophysical settings, and we have the historic vegetation formally tagged to those types. In Oklahoma, we have 140 ecological groups of soils, and we also have percent slope and bottomland types. So we don't have the historic vegetation formally tagged to those yet. It would be a project to get that done, because I think the 140 types probably too many, and we also need to do some work on the incorporating the slope and bottomland types into the formal enduring features data layer.
Okay.
So it's close, but it's not quite done.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess a follow-up question is, what do you, how much work do you think it would be to update this, and how frequently do you think we should do it?
I think ideally it would be great to update it on a regular basis, say update a certain percentage of the state on each year. And I think there's a fairly elegant way to probably do that by only updating areas that have changed from time 1 to time 2. That is from, the time the thing was completed to the new land cover. So my current plan, and we're working with Texas right now on a methodology, is to identify areas of change, cut those out, select the image objects that are within those, and then do the new land cover and attribute the objects with the new land cover within those areas that have changed. So for Texas, we have, for those 97 types in Texas, we have a key that shows what type should be mapped for what land cover for each of those 97 enduring features. So you could, if you have a land cover and an enduring feature, which we do have the enduring feature, and we will have the new land cover, then you can key that directly to what should be mapped there. You see what I mean, if that makes sense?
Yep.
So that's the idea. It seems like it could be workable, reasonably workable, and my hope would be that each state, or maybe the LCC or somebody, would assign like a half a staff to work on just continuously updating it every year. So you wouldn't get the whole thing updated every year. You would just get 10% or whatever, 5% or 20% updated a year. You might want to focus on those areas where change are occurring, like the urban corridors and buffers of urban areas and stuff like that. So, yep, we're thinking about it.
Very cool.
Great, yeah. Any other questions from folks on the phone? Great. Well, thanks again, Dave and Lee, for both the work and the presentation. And we will get this, Blair recorded this webinar, so it will be posted on the website too, so we'll circulate that to folks. I know there's a few people who couldn't be on the call today. So thank you very much.
All right.
And we look forward to hearing more on this.
Great, thanks. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks.